Good evening, everyone. Let's make a start. Thanks for coming. My name's Ben Kunza. I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Canning. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. I declare the agenda briefing of 12 September 2023 open at 6 o'clock. We acknowledge the Whadjuk people. Everyone. Let's make a start. Thanks. We acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders, both past and present. Before I go through how tonight's meeting will run, some people are probably wondering why a number of us are wearing our footy colours here this evening. Councillor Paul Tuchek came up with a great initiative of every agenda briefing every month. Council and the executive staff would support a charity. And so tonight, Councillor Tuchek, do you want to explain why we're in our footy colours?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I just thought we could add some unity and cohesion and a little fun to our agenda briefing without diminishing the importance of the meeting, of course. It's just coming together as a council to raise funds to donate to different registered charities each month. It's a unique opportunity and it's a great cause. Last month was Jeans for Genes and we made a donation. Tonight, obviously, is Footy Colours and that supports a foundation for children with cancer. And I'll put on social media the explanation if you wanted to check out any further information about the cause. And next month is Breast Cancer Awareness and hopefully we can all wear something pink. So thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Tuchak. Great initiative, and thanks to those who have participated and supported the cause. Going on, for those that haven't been to an agenda briefing before, I'll just run through the rules and the reason why we're here. So in accordance with City of Canning Policy CM 105, agenda briefings are conducted for the purpose of providing elected members with a forum to ask questions of the City's administration and to receive answers to those questions to enable informed decision-making by Council at the following week's Ordinary Council meeting. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1995, agenda briefings are not decision-making forums. Questions may be asked and answered, but there'll be no debate or discussion. Questions asked tonight must be specifically relevant to the item being discussed. Elected members and employees must disclose any financial proximity or partiality interest they have in an item to be discussed and declare the nature of the interest at the commencement of the briefing or at the latest when the item is about to be discussed. If a member or employee has a financial proximity or impartiality interest in a matter arising during discussion, the nature of that interest must be disclosed as soon as possible after the matter is raised. Interests are to be disclosed in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 1995 as they apply to council meetings. Individuals disclosing an interest other than impartiality interest must not participate in that part of the briefing relevant to their interest and must leave the meeting whilst the item is under discussion. Agenda briefings are public meetings and any information provided to the meeting by attendees may be publicly accessible. May I ask everyone here this evening to make sure your mobile phones are turned off or on silent for the duration of the briefing. The briefing is being live streamed via the City's YouTube channel, and I also say hi to everyone watching live tonight or post-recorded. Moving to attendance. Apologies. Mayor Patrick Hole is an apology for tonight's briefing. Unfortunately, fortunately, he's representing the City of Canning at a Wowga Regional State Conference and has unable to come. Councillor Jacobs is not in attendance at the moment, but I understand he's running late. Approved leave of absence. There is no approved leave. Disclosure of interest. Chief Executive Officer, can you please read out any of the disclosures?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In relation to item 3.1, declarations of financial direct or indirect interest, there are none. In relation to item 3.2, declaration of interest affecting impartiality, I've received two. The first is from Deputy Mayor Ben Kunza in relation to item CO 00523 on page 156. The item details are the grant applications, Ferndale Reserve Facilities Upgrade and Corinthian Park Community Facility Upgrade. The nature of his interest is I'm a life member of the Linwood Ferndale Football Club, which is a stakeholder in this process, as a leaseholder and use of the reserve and its facilities. The second declaration of impartiality is from Councillor Steve Parkinson in relation to item CD 01523 The report title is the recommendation to the West Australian Planning Commission in relation to the telecommunications tower. The nature of his interest is Councillor Parkinson was employed by Optus for 18 years and he was involved in mobile site acquisitions. That's all of the interest I've received. Sorry, Councillor Spencer-Teo. Getting the paperwork in late. Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo. So I've received a declaration of interest affecting impartiality from Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo in relation to item CO00523, CSRFF funding, grant funding for Ferndale Reserve facilities upgrade and Corinthian Park community facility upgrade. The nature of her interest is she's a member of the Corinthian Park Tennis Club.
Thank you, CEO. Moving on to question time for the public. Responses to previous questions taken on notice will be noted in the ordinary council meeting agenda. Move to question time. The time set aside for public questions is 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. A question must relate to the items listed on the agenda paper. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next ordinary council meeting. In accordance with policy AD02, members of the public who have registered their interest to ask questions with the City's administration shall be called upon in the order in which the registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal questions. However, I have none. Is there anyone in the gallery that would like to ask a question in relation to tonight's agenda? Please step forward. Easy. Sorry, I open question time at 6:07 and I close question time at 6:07. We'll move on to deputations. A deputation has been approved for Mr. Joe Bennett, representing the company Ventia, regarding item CD 01523, recommendation to the West Australian Planning Commission for proposed telecommunications infrastructure at 40 Centenary Avenue, lot 4256, Wilson. Mr. Bennett, would you like to step forward? You have 10 minutes in which to make your deputation. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council. Just to clarify, my name's Clinton Northey. So Joe is one of my colleagues. I'm his manager. I'm here on behalf of our company tonight. Okay. Good evening, all. As already explained, my name is Clinton Northey. I'm the Town Planning Manager at Ventia. On behalf of our client Indara and Optus, I thank you for the opportunity to talk in favour of the proposal. I would like to specifically talk to a number of areas that have been raised throughout the planning process, noting a formal response has already been provided to Council on the 8th of August this year in regards to the submissions made in relation to the actual proposal itself. I also note the comprehensive planning assessment that has been detailed within tonight's agenda by the city planners. Just to give you a bit of a history of the site, Optus has specifically been looking in the area for improved Optus coverage, including mobile capacity in the area since 2012, and has reviewed a number of sites in the area over that time. This has included a number of locations within Centenary Park where we have worked with Council to determine the preferred location within the park itself. The current location has been selected and is considered the most suitable candidate for a number of reasons. And this includes from planning, which considers the site does not significantly impact the surrounding visual amenity. The location is considered to be the most practical in terms of providing power and suitable vehicle access to the actual facility itself, and obviously coverage, which is paramount for the reason why we need the facility there. Just talking on location and visual impact, in selecting this site as a location for a new telecommunications facility, Indara and Optus have been mindful of the recreational value of this property and have sought to identify a site for facility without interfering with or interrupting the existing uses and enjoyment for the uses of the park itself. We consider that the location is the most practical and appropriate place for a new facility because of a number of factors, and this includes the location, and relatively small footprint of the facility, that it will have a minimal impact on the use of the park, in particular for existing sporting clubs. The presence of existing tall, mature trees surrounding the site, which will provide significant screening for the facility. And we've provided 6 montages, which are actually within the agenda, showing what it'll look like from those 6 vantage points. Notwithstanding this, SAT has ruled on a number of cases that height is an integral part to mobile base stations, and that visibility in itself does not necessarily equate to an adverse visual impact. Also, the topography of the land helps in ensuring that the facility doesn't stand out as much, because from the point of a beaten street down to the site itself, there's a fall of approximately 15 metres. And the facility is out of the direct line of most residential properties overlooking the park, including those along Wendouree Road. While the proposed facility would be located in a park area, it would not be situated in an area specifically that would inhibit the existing parkland. In selecting this site, Optus consider the location would minimise the visual impact on the surrounding community. Recreation areas are considered to be viable land uses to provide telco services, as they provide a natural buffer from surrounding land uses and generally have a level of screening via vegetation, as is the case with this facility, and are not making it not highly visible. And there's a number of examples of this around the state. Just in terms of EME concerns, which was raised with a number of the submissions, we'd like to say that despite a number of submissions raising the concerns regarding exposure to electromagnetic energy emissions from antennas within the community, there is no evidence telecommunication technologies such as 5G cause adverse health impacts to humans. Optus, as a major reputable Australian carrier holding a spectrum licence, can assure the emissions from the proposed facility will be significantly below the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, known as our PANSA, standards, which have been adopted by ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority. It should also be noted that carriers simply have to comply with these national standards, and EME is not an assessment criteria for assessment. As noted within the officer's recommendation, due to the standards set by our PANSA incorporating substantial safety margins, the state planning policy under section 5.2 does not recommend or identify minimum setback distances from residential properties. And we've provided an EMA report which shows that the actual maximum levels of the site, and this is with a precaution built into it, would be 3.14% of these standards. And lastly, on the last point, I'd just like to say that there are compelling reasons in why council should support the facility, which will be of significant public benefit. In particular, during emergencies, so it doesn't matter if you're with Optus, Telstra, Vodafone, or TPG as it's known now, calling 000, you'll still be able, you can still do that. Further noted is the significant support that the application received throughout the notification process. Generally, we'd only hear from those that are actually against the facility. However, in this instance, approximately 20% of submissions have been supportive. Thank you for your time, Council.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Northern. Does any elected members have any questions following that presentation? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, a deputation has been approved for Mrs. Rosalind Smith regarding item CD 01523, recommendation to the WA Planning Commission for proposed telecommunication infrastructure at 40 Centenary Avenue, Wilson. Mrs. Smith, likewise, you have 10 minutes to make your deputation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'm presenting a deputation against the location of the proposed infrastructure 105.291. The proposed location raises concern due to the infrastructure's primary function, visual impact, the proximity to residents' homes, the height, the prominence at entry to Centenary Park, an absolute contrast to intended use, aims and purpose of the public green space, This makes it a very poor fit for this location. The front door of the home closest to the site is no more than 50 metres away, which is absurd and completely inappropriate. Some of the closest homes enjoy an elevated aspect, and if the proposal goes ahead, their view, vista and panorama will be straight at a 5G communications tower. Other comparable rejected applications, the closest homes are significantly further from the tower. This area of Wilson has become an area of intensive subdivision, making it a highly dense, urbanised zone. Therefore, there are many residents affected. Worth noting that City of South Perth and Victoria Park provide 300-metre exemptions. So there needn't be exposure of residents to extended hours of EME emissions from telecommunications, particularly 5G, which could pose health risks. This is still undisclosed or unconfirmed. Additionally, this location in Centenary Park is within 150 metres of the Wilson Retirement Village and a children's playground, and I will highlight later how this contravenes best practice. The 31-metre height makes it a significant piece of infrastructure. The height of the pole and attached equipment at the top will make for an ugly outlook, degraded streetscape. Its appearance will have a detrimental impact on the visual aesthetics of Centenary Park and the surrounds. It's an extremely tall and ugly standalone structure. In this location, there is absolutely no other existing comparable infrastructure. In this location, there are no other overhead power lines, light poles or buildings to integrate the structure. And there is no major road or functional utility nearby to absorb its presence or to integrate its function. In accordance with the immediate area's intended use, MER, Parks and Recreation, Centenary Park attracts many children, families and sports clubs, as you all know, which has been supported by significant investment recently: playing fields, lighting, function rooms, change rooms, playgrounds and recent tree planting. And this has all been done to encourage the use of what? Recreational and community activities. The proposal would compromise the community facility, which we now enjoy, having previously been a rubbish tip, so let's not regress. The impact of the installation from the pole was described in the application by the city assessment, including its impact on existing trees. The presence of these few beautiful trees do not provide a camouflage for this infrastructure, but rather is a unique section of canopy, which is extremely rare in Wilson. The trees provide shade, add value to the areas of Centenary Park, including an entranceway to Centenary Park. Disturbing the surrounding land runs risk of unnecessary disturbing contaminated soil, such as asbestos, and the telecommunication reserve sounds completely hideous and would be a stark contrast to the current modest shady grove. All of the negative factors associated with the proposed telecommunications installation at this site will impact on the character of Wilson, its future amenity, property value, livability, intended aims and purpose of its proposed location, which is intended to support a growing, healthy, diverse community to enjoy a safe and beautiful space for recreation, exercise and cultural celebrations. So in addition to the strong community objection the council received in response to the proposal, the assessment completed by City of Canning officer is just one other tool for informing the council's recommendation to WAPC, but unfortunately this particular assessment, compared to others by the city on the same issue, was extremely weak, missing particularly important aspects, and in fact could possibly raise concerns with compliance with policy objective SPP 5.2, which is around promoting a consistent approach in these assessments. However, I will work toward filling in some of the gaps. Number one, there are no basketball courts. It's a small half court and floodlights would not add value to the asset. The grove of trees consists of only 6 reasonably mature trees, absolutely would not camouflage the infrastructure due to the openness of the site. The height of the trees compared to the 31-metre pole, and it's a scarce plantation, highly exposed with absolutely no undergrowth. Number 3, there is no other infrastructure to integrate the function or absorb the visual impact. Reference to adjacent overhead wires is not accurate. However, it does highlight the alternative location, a significant distance in a west direction on Centenary Ave, with overhead power lines in situ. Number 4, the photos along the park toward the proposed site are misleading, giving the impression the lights are similar infrastructure, but we all know this isn't the case. Street lights are not nearly as high and have, as intended, a discrete thin profile. Number 5, the risk assessment is extremely limited and does not include a relevant scope of potential risk, therefore adds little value to the assessment. Critical policy measures and location considerations, including reference to clause 511(2), were not accurately assessed, so I'm just going to quickly run through those now. The telecommunications infrastructure should be sited and designed to minimise visual impact and location where it will not be prominently visible from significant locations such as recreation sites. Centenary Park is a recreational precinct. The location to avoid detracting from a significant view of a streetscape, vista or panorama, whether viewed from public or private land. Elevated homes from this particular location, their panoramas will be straight at a 5G communications tower, whether you are on Wendouree, Beaton or McManus Streets. Beaton Park is a common access point for local community members. The infrastructure location would detract from a significant view of a vista. They're not to be located on sites where environmental, social and visual landscape values may be compromised. This is a recreational site. It's central to the Australian outdoors culture, where diverse cultural celebrations also take place. The visual landscape is significant and unique for residents and park users to meet, play and socialise. Telecommunications infrastructure should be co-located whenever possible with overhead lines and towers with existing infrastructure, or at least mounted on existing or proposed buildings. As already highlighted, this proposed site does not include co-located overhead lines, towers or buildings. It's a very tall standalone telecommunications structure. SPP 5.2 refers to efficacy of the infrastructure, requiring a high point in the landscape. So the invasive nature of this location butted up against homes and near sensitive land use may not even maximise the pole's effectiveness, which once again raises the urgency to find an alternative elevated open space for this proposed infrastructure. Telecommunications facilities should not be located within 300 metres of services sensitive uses, such as nursing homes or children's playgrounds. That's just to name a few. There is a retirement village and all residents are at the eligible age for residential aged care and they are within 100 metres of the proposed site. There is a children's playground also within around 150 metres of the proposed site. Number 7, a summary statement in the brief refers to non-support resulting in unresolved coverage. This is an assumption and is not relevant to the inappropriateness of the location. Number 8, currently there are only 10 councillors, not the usual 11. The missing council position is one of BLU councillors, being the ward in which this proposal affects. Why the rush? Why not wait for the impending election? So, given all of the above, the recommendation to support isn't the best option, and this one single proposed site location isn't the carrier's best effort. Improving coverage for current and potential customers falls substantially within the business case, the huge capacity and the capability of the telecommunications sector, therefore should never compromise the livability of communities. The location butted up against home in a densely urbanised zone in a busy leisure and recreational space with absolutely no other infrastructure to absorb its primary function and visual impact is not an appropriate location. Do the right and most obvious thing, councillors. Follow due process. Request another location as per page 55 of the briefing. Don't be deterred by an appeals process, a delayed response or a decision by WAPC, because as ratepayers, we are not deterred. We want the best for Wilson. That's why we are here and that's why you are here. I implore you not to support this proposal at this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Smith, for your coming tonight and giving that deputation. Does anyone have any questions of Mrs Smith? No, thank you. It's much appreciated. We've got one more deputation this evening regarding CD 01523. Mr. Mike Willison, are you in the room? Thank you. Come forward. Likewise, you have 10 minutes to present.
Good evening. Yes. Sorry, I'm far less prepared as my neighbor here, but I do have a few points to raise. So let's put all the EME issues to the side for a second. 30+ meters high, well and truly above the tree cover in that area, towering over all the other trees. I live in that neighborhood. I'll be looking straight at it. I'm not happy. Another thing, quite an eyesore, obviously. Another issue that probably worth mentioning. As an engineer, I know 30 meters, you're going to have a pretty significant base. I have not looked at any of the paperwork or any of the information. Apologies. I just feel that the base of that will have to be fairly substantial, so will not be an ideal site for a playground in a recreational area. We talked about, I heard it mentioned a preferred elevated site right across the street, Centenary Road. There's an elevated area. There's very little there. Power, all the facilities. I struggle to understand why this location was not pushed back. I understand there's a financial component that from a lease arrangement, and as a ratepayer, I'm not interested in that money for that area, okay? I understand we're getting a little bit of money and it might bring our rates down, but probably not a whole lot, and this is the wrong place for it. And I suppose the other thing to think about is, this is just the start. Mobile communication is going to keep coming. We got to be firm here, right? You know, you let this happen here, then they're going to have another one just down the road at the other end of Centenary Park, and then right in the middle of Centenary Park. Don't let, in my humble opinion, don't let it start. Sorry, my phone keeps locking up on me. I guess probably the other thing probably worth mentioning, and I know the EME issues are not a factor in this, and I heard the comments that, you know, there was no evidence. Well, I guess the one thing, you know, to understand or remember that, you know, in the beginning the tobacco industry said smoking was fine. So we all know what happened there. You don't want to be in the back end of this, having approved this, and then find out, you know, 5 years later that this is all what happens. So, what else? Sorry, far less prepared. So, in summary, yeah, I oppose this. I'm a resident in that area. I don't want it, and I encourage all the councillors and members to oppose this. You work for us. I would propose, and I think we should just send this back for a review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Willison, for coming tonight and for giving us your thoughts. Just to let you know that I'll be bringing forward that item, so once we move to reports, that will be the first one we deal with, so you don't need to wait all of the night to hear it. One more deputation has been approved, this time for the Public Transport Authority regarding CD 01623, recommendation to the West Australian Planning Commission for the proposed Metronet Development Application Number 2, proposed new stations at Queen's Park and Cannington station precincts and public realm. Attending are a number of representatives who are going to be presenting. The floor is yours, our ears are yours.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for your time this evening, and also considering the officer's consideration of the development application 2, as we're calling it, next week, I believe. Just to be clear, the development application 2 for this project relates to the stations and the urban realm component of the level crossing removal project in the city of Canning. I just want to note that the information provided in the development application, including the designs and all the documentation, this is a culmination of over 2 years' worth of work where we've been consulting with the city and the community and other key stakeholders to develop the concept of this project, and then we've carried that through into the detailed design phase, which is what we're in now. I'll use the opportunity to thank the city and also the officers for their time spent on this. We know it does take a lot of time, and we greatly appreciate that. We've talked a lot about the benefits of this project being the removal of the level crossings, which I think most people agree is a great benefit, and subsequently reducing congestion on the roads. But the other great benefit of this is that we're unlocking all the land that is currently locked away behind the fence of the rail corridor. So by lifting the rail line up in the air, we have access to this land and we're able to develop it for community use, which is what this development application covers. These parkland spaces that we'll be creating, there'll be a mixture of uses and areas. And they include civic spaces, community nodes, we have a nature playground, a youth zone, a dog park, a network of pathways and PSP, and landscaping throughout as well. And this area will be between Mill Street up to Gerrard Street. We're also reconstructing 2 train stations within the City of Canning, being Cannington Train Station and Queen's Park Station. I'll note that the development of these designs, which we're quite proud of, have been through quite a rigorous design process. So through the design development, we go through the Office of Government Architect and the State Design Review Panel as part of that process, which has resulted in what I think are quite magnificent stations and a far cry from what exists today. I'll also note as well that the Cannington train station, we've previously heard the city's comments around that being a bit of a focal point for the area. It is the busiest of the 2 stations as well, but we understand that it is a bit of a centrepiece, if you like, of the area and a gateway to Cecil Avenue and then to Cannington Shopping Precinct. The development application, we were quite encouraged that we received a total of 44 public comments back, of which 36 were in support of the project. I will note that of those 36 comments received, some people did have comments and concerns that were raised, which we have noted. And these were around the elevation of the rail, community safety and security, the shared path connections and how that'll interface with the principal shared path network, passenger parking and environmental concerns as well around noise, tree canopy coverage and the type of planting that will be included as part of the project. So just to acknowledge that we do get those comments, we will take them on board. I also want to say that we have engaged significantly with community throughout the development of this project, and this is just another step in that, and we will continue to consult with the community going forward. I now just wanted to use the rest of the time to touch on some of the conditions and just make note of some of the comments we have. We will feed this back to the officers in writing for their consideration. Condition 9 of Section A is regarding the inclusion of passenger toilets or public toilets. So just to make note that Cannington train station does include public toilets behind the fare gates of the train station. Queen's Park Station does not have public toilets. We are including provisions for up to 2 locations within the public realm areas for the city to install toilets should they so wish at a later date. Condition 9, Section C is regarding the skate park. We are going to request a slight rewording to this, only because it is quite specific in the final words. It mentions a skate bowl and some other things. We think that's quite specific. We want to leave this open for a bit more discussion and what that's going to be, and ensure that we can, I guess, accommodate various wheel users, being skateboards or scooters or so forth. Condition 14 and 15 relates to the space proofing of the city's future provisions or road provisions. So we have a requirement as part of the project to develop for 2032 traffic modelling, which we've been working and designing to. The city has future aspirations in terms of what will be required, and we've been consulting with the city on these aspects. And where possible, we have accommodated the future proofing and I'll call it space proofing if you like, so the city can undertake these works at a later date without significant change or rework as to what we're putting in place. The Cecilave and Sevenoaks intersection, so we have been talking to the city about what this looks like. We understand the recently completed or almost complete Cecilave works. We've agreed that we will tie into that, so they match effectively. We're actually going to request that this condition is removed. We don't feel like it needs to be a condition, but if it is to remain as a condition, we just request that there is a cost sharing to be undertaken between the city and the project, which has been previously agreed in principle. Specifically, we will build the works, but to a greater standard that wasn't included in the project to tie in with the city's recently completed works. Condition 18 is around the car park access. So car park access in the design is proposed to be from Sevenoaks, and the city has requested that this access is provided from Railway Parade. We have had quite a few discussions around this and as to why we believe access off Sevenoaks is the best solution. I won't go into the details because I don't have time, but we still stand behind that and we believe this is the best option. We have had discussions with Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and we believe we're aligned with them. And we'll keep that as is, sorry. The principal shared path, condition 19. So this condition talks about ensuring that the principal shared path throughout the entire project is 4 metres in accordance with current standards. We have accommodated this where we can and where we are required to replace sections of the PSP. We don't have it within the scope of the project to rebuild the whole PSP, so there are sections that will remain as they currently are, and we will basically hold our position on the current design that is there right now. Condition 26 talks about management and maintenance. So this condition, I guess, specifically requests that a management and maintenance agreement is in place between the state and the city prior to construction commencing. We're going to request that this is either removed or the wording changed to be the condition is in place before the end of the project, effectively. Reason being is we're in heavy discussions. We have a lot more work to do and negotiations to be had, and it just won't be complete prior to construction. And the last condition to raise was condition 28, which is around bike parking spaces. This might be a wording issue, but it requests that all bike parking spaces have water protection. We confirmed that the secure bike compounds at the stations, as in the PTA or Transperth ones, are waterproofed. However, we have a number of U-rails, throughout the urban realm areas which do not have weather protection, and we don't believe that that's required. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillis. Any questions from any of the elected members? Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Question. Condition number 26, what's Metronet's view about 5-year maintenance period as opposed to 2 years?
Look, currently we have offered up a 2-year maintenance period, which is in line with other projects, we believe. We are aware that there are ongoing discussions and negotiations to be had between the city and the state.
Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is Metronet able to confirm as part of condition 9 that basketball facilities will be included in the youth plaza?
Yes. Yep.
Any further questions? Councillor Jacobs?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. While we've got you here, Metronet, is the timings for the project starting, I think, November? Is there any change and has any works begun? I think maybe you've expanded the road, taking car parks for the project, and I think you're putting the deeper pipeline under Beckenham stations. Could you just quickly give us a timeline upgrade?
Yep, no problem. So the start date for the shutdown of the rail line and the commencement of what we're calling the major works, the 20th of November, that remains, and that's when we will we'll crack into the rail corridor, remove the rail line and start building the elevated rail structure. The works that you may have seen around at this stage, what we call the forward works, and that's in preparation of, I guess, well, that's clearing the way to ensure that we can get in as quickly as possible to build the elevated rail structure.
Any further questions? Thank you for coming along tonight and presenting. I'll bring this forward after the mobile phone tower item. So.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 5, as I mentioned previously, I'll be bringing forward item CD 01523, recommendation to the WA Planning Commission for proposed telecommunications infrastructure at 40 Centenary Avenue, lot 4256 Wilson. The recommendation is on page 65 of the agenda, is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Bain?
A few questions, if I may, Deputy Mayor. For the benefit of our community, would it please be possible to include in the OCM papers a map showing the other locations within Centenary Park that the city considered and assessed?
Director Bride?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, we can put that in as an additional attachment.
Thank you. Did the DPLH approach the city seeking its recommendation as both the manager of the proposed site and also as the representative body of the local community?
Director Bride?
It wasn't DPLH who put this submission through. It was obviously Optus and their consultants who looked at Centenary Park as being in the catchment area, and they contacted the city, the commercial services team who engages on these sort of matters. And as part of that assessment, in terms of the operational and practical, I guess, objectives of where the tower was to be located, that was the site that operationally was the preferred site to then allow the application to be assessed. Council's obviously looking at the submitted application for a specific site, so it has to make a determination on the application site submitted.
Next question, Councillor Bain.
Can the city confirm that the phone tower will be visible to nearby residents despite the trees?
Director Bride?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, we make that pretty clear in the report that the tower will be above the height of the trees. So, as pointed out in the deputation by the consultant, the screening is only a partial screening of the tower. A portion of the tower, there is a portion of the tower obviously above and beyond the height of the trees.
Councillor Bain?
Thank you. In its assessment, does the city consider the tower a low impact facility?
Director Bride?
No, the reason that a development application is needed is because it isn't a low impact facility. So only those low impact facilities that meet a certain threshold aren't required to go through a development approval process. So it's not a low impact facility.
Anything further, Councillor Bain?
A couple more, if I may, Deputy Mayor. The phone tower at Hossack Reserve that Council didn't support in 2017, in the report the city supported its installation, noting that the distance of 170 metres from nearby residential properties was an adequate setback. How short would a setback need to be considered insufficient?
Director Bride?
Yeah, through Mr Deputy Mayor. The Statement of Planning Policy 5.2 specifically rules out setback distances. So there is no prescribed setback that should be entertained as part of a development application for a mobile phone tower. There were a lot of local governments many years ago did have 200 metre setbacks, 300 metre setbacks in their local planning policies for telecommunication towers. But this state planning policy trumps all of those local planning policies, and it's very clear that given the EME the low EME emissions generated from these towers, given the transmission and the size of the antennas, that it's not appropriate under state planning policy to identify or deem a certain development setback from these towers based on health grounds.
Can I just ask before you go, Councillor Bain, following on from that, it was commented tonight that both the City of South Perth and the town of Vic Park have buffer zones. Is that a historic redundant point, or, I mean, could they still have them in their town planning schemes?
Yes, through Deputy Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice and just check, but in terms of State Planning Policy 5.2, it's a higher order state policy, and that makes it clear that arbitrary setbacks of any distance are not to be applied in any local planning policy or town planning scheme. So if they are there, the reality is SPP 5.2 is the premier policy.
Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At its OCM in April, so it's there's, I guess, evidence of precedent set only a few months ago. The City of Bayswater and its council, they both rejected a telecommunications tower very similar to this one in that it's 30 metres tall, located in a reserve and amongst trees, and also received 40 plus objections. Can the City please provide further information in the OCM papers regarding that decision to reject it by both the City of Bayswater and its council?
Director Bride?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I think it'd be more appropriate maybe to circulate, if we can find that report, we'll just circulate it to elected members. I don't think it needs to be in the officer's report.
Any further questions, Councillor Bain? I was just going to ask, there was a question asked earlier this evening about why the rush. Director Bride, are you just able to provide some clarification? It was a pertinent point that the Beeloo ward doesn't have a sitting councillor at the moment to represent those residents. Are you just able to go through the legislative compulsion to deal with this now?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The application was lodged with the Department of Planning. It's the WA, or the West Australian Planning Commission, who makes the decision. We are a referral agency, so we're responding to the process of the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. We've had a certain time, usually we get a period of 28 days to respond, but the department has allowed some additional time to accommodate this council meeting, but certainly any other extensions would be difficult to attain from the Department of Planning. So it's not our process, it's Department of Planning's process, and they've given us a certain amount of time to respond.
Thank you. Any further questions on this matter? Councillor Jacobs?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I don't know, but would we be able to get like a map of the signal of Optus? Is that like a known black spot? I mean, I can't find it anywhere. Could that be something that we could, so we could see what their strategy is to get the network out to everyone that uses mobile phones?
Director Bride?
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor. There was a catchment map, which was the area that they had issues with coverage, so we can circulate that to elected members.
I've got two more, Deputy Mayor. I noticed right on the border, almost South Perth, I think you go another 200 metres to Manning. Just before Manning, you get to South Perth. Is it a case of if we say no, they go to South Perth and do it, or is it hard to obviously say what they want to do if they don't get this? Is it? My understanding is if we say no, they can go to a higher authority. Is my understanding correct?
Director Bride?
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor. The first point is there is obviously a certain geographical area where the tower needs to be located to meet the operational and performance objectives for improved coverage. So that map identifies, I guess, the land area that the tower needs to be located within. In terms of an appeal process, if the development is refused by the West Australian Planning Commission, the applicant would have a right of appeal review through SAT. However, given the city would be entertaining a future lease, it would possibly not be relevant to do so.
If you haven't already done so, Councillor Jacobs, I encourage you to watch the strategic information briefing from last week. It covered these issues. Do you have any further questions?
Thank you. One more question, and it might have been covered in the, as I was apology for last week with work. the income from this site, is there an actual figure? Because I may have missed it in something, but is it, some of the residents mentioned that that was an income, but it's insignificant. But from memory, this is what, like, it's about what, $20,000 a year or something for these, or $30,000 a year for these things?
Director Bride.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, unless I get this wrong, maybe Chris O'Connor can update me, but I think it's around 25,000 approximately.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. It would be determined by a market valuation that will be undertaken as part of the lease negotiations. But the recent similar matters that we've considered or have come through this council have been in the order of $25,000 per annum, with escalation, of course.
Any further questions,
What was
councillors?
that last bit with escalation, or with inflation?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, within the lease there'll be a market review and CPI increases on an annual basis. So that's what I meant by escalation.
And Deputy Mayor, just the last sentence that Director Bride said, could he rephrase it, because I didn't understand its meaning? Thank you.
Do you remember what it was, Director Bride? No? What was it in reference to, Jesse?
It was something to do with going to SAT, but then the city wouldn't do it because we could get income. If you could rephrase it so I could understand it, thank you.
Director Bride.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's up to the applicant to decide whether they wish to appeal if it hypothetically was refused by the West Australian Planning Commission. But given the city would be the party that would be responsible for a lease arrangement, the city can consider whether to grant a lease as well. So it'd be up to the applicant to make a decision whether they appeal to SAT.
Yeah, the SIB last week that's on the hub went through a number of items on this agenda, so I encourage you to have a listen. Any further questions? Councillor Sweeney?
Yes, thank you. Just on page 71 of the officer's recommendation under the heading Risks to Human Health and Safety at item 28, talks about there, it's also noted that portions of Centenary Park were previously used as a landfill site and is identified by the Department of Environment and Regulation, DEWA, as possibly contaminated, investigation required. Then goes on to say that the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage have referred the application to DEWA, Contamination Branch, who will provide advice on this aspect of the proposal, including any management plans that will be required in preparing the site for development. My question here is, will councillors be afforded opportunity to review this assessment report from DEWA before next week?
Director Bride.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. As I said before, this is a Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage proposal. So just like DEWA, the city was a party that the application's been referred to. It's unlikely that we would have access to the advice. It's up to the Department of Planning to consider the advice of a number of state government agencies as part of their assessment.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted further clarification on one of the questions I asked. So I just want to confirm the DPLH, they've approached us and is seeking a recommendation as the manager of the site.
Director Bride?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. No, they're the decision maker on the development application. So that's they're asking the city to provide its recommendation. So they are the decision maker. Well, the West Australian Planning Commission is the decision maker, and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage reports to the West Australian Planning Commission. So that's the capacity in which we're dealing with them in relation to the development application.
Yep. So they're seeking a recommendation from us as the manager, but also as representatives of the community. Is that correct?
Director Bride?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, they're seeking our comments in relation to the development application. So they're asking Council's position as a regulator in relation to the development proposal. That's the limitation of what they're asking.
Councillor Parkinson?
Yeah, just for clarity, if the motion is not supported, the tower and the installation is still likely to go ahead. Is that a correct statement?
Director Bride?
Through Deputy Mayor, if the West Australian Planning Commission refuses the tower, then the tower won't be constructed, unless the applicant decides to lodge an appeal with review with SAT. But certainly development approval is required. If it's not given, then they can't build it.
Maybe I need to rephrase that. I meant if this council does not support the motion, is it still likely that the application will go forward regardless?
Yes, because we're not the decision maker. But Director Bride?
Yeah, so the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage will make their planning assessment using the State Planning Policy 5.2, which is the relevant planning policy at the state level. So they will decide whether they believe it should be approved. But given we believe it's compliance with SP 5.2, it's likely that they probably would support it.
And that's why if you don't support it, you have to give valid planning reasons to support your decision making. Any further questions? All right, moving on. I will also bring forward, sorry, I don't have it in front of me. One moment. CD 01623, recommendation to the West Australian Planning Commission for the proposed Metronet development application number 2, proposed new stations at Queen's Park and Cannington, station precincts and public realm. The recommendation is on page 88 of the agenda and is on screen now. Councillors, any questions? No? All right. Moving on. We'll move to reports of committee meetings. There are none. We'll move to reports of the Chief Executive Officer. There are none. Move to 7.2, Mrs. Lorraine Driscoll, the Director of Corporate and Commercial. The recommendation is on page 5 of the agenda, is on screen now. That's CC 04022, adjourned motion, proposed lease for Strata Junior Football Club. The report was originally presented to Council in October 2022, where the officer recommendation was moved and debated and then adjourned. Additional comments have been added to a new section at the end of the report labelled Comments Post Adjourned Motion. A suggested alternate motion has been included in the report for Council's further consideration. Councillors, do you have any questions? No questions? Moving on again. To CC 01923, proposed road closure portion of Cunnington Way, Queen's Park. The recommendation is on page 14 of the agenda, is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? No, moving on. CC 02023, monthly financial report, August 2023. The recommendation is on page 19 of the agenda, is on screen now. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. TPS 23, has the City received any word from the Minister regarding the use of this reserve to fund the projects approved by Council at the budget?
Director Bride?
Through Mr Mayor, we have had discussions internally with Director Bowe and Manager Dion Johnson. We're just about to, we had to compile quite a detailed report, so we're just about to send that off. So that'd be, hopefully in the next week, we'll have that to the Minister.
Anything else? Moving on. Move to Director Graham Brides, Director of Planning and Development, CC 01423, adoption of Scheme Amendment 13 to Local Planning Scheme number 42, Additional Use Medical Centre at 23 Mills Street, Cannington. The recommendation on page 555 of the agenda is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? No, moving on. Move to Mr Warren Bowes, Director of Infrastructure and Environment, EN 01723. It's a major undertaking, major trading undertaking, Wellback Golf Course business plan. The recommendation is on page 111 of the agenda, is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? No, moving on. EN 01823, further analysis of dogs on leash and off leash spaces. The recommendations on page 126 of the agenda is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Page 17, the city notes that it has installed fencing at the Audley Park playground. Can we just confirm that before the OCM? Thank you.
Director Bowe?
We will do, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? I've just got a couple of questions. Just with respect to, is there any information or data with respect to the decision-making of the environmental impact of dog off-lead areas in conservation zones? Obviously, there's a number of recommendations in terms of actions taken in nominated conservation areas. Is there anything that supports each recommendation?
May I ask our Manager of Parks and Environment, Dion Johnson, to answer that, Mr Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, yep, just checking. No, there isn't anything on hand, but I'll talk to the conservation team between now and the OCM and see if we can provide some information.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Like, as I flagged with you previously, at Adenia Park, for example, whilst the Canning River Regional Park has environmental significance, the area around the principal shared path is, I guess, not necessarily of environmental significance, and I just wonder whether it will have unintended consequences of pushing people towards places like Riverton Reserve that has conflict with sporting uses if we were to move that to an on-lead area. And then also Shelley Beach Park, the eastern side, the nominated areas to make that on-lead at Prisoners Point. I just wondered, does that have any impact on the dog beach?
We'll have to get back to you on that one. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Any further questions? No, moving on. Move to Director Sarah McQuaid's Customer and Community Portfolio, CO 00523, the DLG SC CSR FF 2425 grant applications for both Ferndale Reserve facilities upgrade and Corinthian Park community facility upgrades, noting there were two declarations in relation to this of impartiality. The recommendation is on page 157 of the agenda, is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? I just wanted to ask a question, Director McQuaid, in regard to Corinthian Park. Obviously, there's been a number of discussions over the last few years. I just wondered what design the city was going through for the grant application.
I can answer that if I can, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, you're correct. There's been a number of options undertaken, design options undertaken in consultation both with the club and internally, and also considering some of the allocations in our long-term financial plan regarding solely a project on asset renewal. At the moment, the facility has a number of different components, or the building has a number of different components that have different ages, were constructed at different times, and were constructed, frankly, to different standards. So at the moment, we're looking at a predominantly renewal project to bring both the functionality and the compliance of the existing facility up to standard. And so we've developed a scope of works that's costed at around the $2.1 million mark, which will make an application through to the DLGSC to obtain the maximum amount of grant funding that's possible. Pending the outcome of that grant, I think it's likely that scope will be revisited and the club will be consulted. But again, the allocation across the next couple of years for that project is around, from the city's perspective, around 1.5 million. So that's the constraint that we're currently working to.
Thank you. And Director McQuaid, just with respect to the scope of the Ferndale Reserve master plan, or the proposed works, when this was initiated, I thought the Scouts were actually included. Obviously, their facilities at a different stage to the rest. I was just wondering if just in terms of publicly asking the question, whether there'll be investment in coming years into the Scouts facility, the First Remnant Scout at Ferndale Reserve, with respect to ensuring that their needs are looked at?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll need to come back to you with the timeframe, but I do know that it is listed on the outer years of our capital works plan, I think 26, 27 perhaps, but I can confirm that. So the consideration will be given to the Scouts as a standalone project in later years. It just was removed from the scope of this particular project with the focus on the club rooms and the single facility.
CEO?
Yeah, just to provide some further clarity, we have had some conversations, though, specifically in relation to our community infrastructure strategy. So, council needs to start to look at a more strategic approach to Scouts as one particular user group, so those are the conversations that we need to have over the next 12 months. That will then further inform the way that and the manner in which that we deal with the scouting facility at Ferndale and also at Parkwood.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, moving on. We'll move to item 8 in the agenda, notice of motions for consideration at the next ordinary council meeting. We've got a notice of motion 00523, agenda briefings in ordinary council meetings during school holidays. The recommendation is on page 170 of the agenda, is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? I just had a question with respect to how this is actually being dealt with. This has been dealt with an officer recommendation to nominate the meetings for next year. I just wondered whether Councillor Secon or the staff had given consideration to an actual council resolution that makes it finite that every year school holidays is taken into consideration. Because staff change, councillors change, and I think it needs to be a philosophical position in the city. Yes, but I just meant in terms of a statement that why we're choosing these months, these dates separate to what would normally be done. CEO?
I would only provide, it's very difficult for us to make a determination about how a future council may consider its meeting cycle, other than to say it would be my intention that we stipulate that we try and or that we will present to council annually a meeting cycle which doesn't include meetings during school holidays. So that would be our intention. The only way that we could philosophically look at doing it is to make it a policy position that council that could then consider. I think the initiative is absolutely supported by us. It would be the way that we want to go forward as well. But if council is looking to make that determination, it would be a policy.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Terry, do you have a question?
If I could just make a comment on that, the reason why it was worded that way is because we have to advertise every year the dates for the following year. So I guess it was kind of like a trial to see if it gained council support for that, then in future years we could look at making it a policy.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next item. Urgent business, there is none. Confidential matters, there are none. Closure, there being no further business, I now declare the agenda briefing finished at 7:09.